The United States government and a guy going through a midlife crisis are shockingly similar, except instead of a nasty divorce, overpriced cocktail lounges, and a brand new Corvette, Uncle Sam is blowing trillions on healthcare programs, tanks, and monthly checks for 70 million retirees. And unlike a normal midlife crisis, the kind you fix with therapy, a new gym membership, and one regrettable tattoo you swear has deep symbolism, this one is different because we have to live through it every single year. This spending problem is exactly how we ended up running a nearly $2 trillion deficit. That means the United States is spending almost $2 trillion more than it brings in annually. We're basically a college freshman with a credit card and zero concept of consequences. And what do we do when the debt collectors come knocking? We just borrow the difference every single year, which is exactly why the national debt has exploded past $38 trillion, a number so large it genuinely feels made up. So that leaves us with the single biggest question facing America today. Can we actually fix this? After spending over 60 hours buried in government reports, spreadsheets, and charts that made me question my own sanity, I've reached a conclusion. The only options we actually have left are ugly, unpopular, and guaranteed to make millions of people furious. But before I rip the bandage off, let me give you some quick context first. Chapter 1. How we got here. A deficit happens when the government spends more than it collects. Think of it like an unprofitable business. And the United States has been an unprofitable business since 2001. Recently, it's gotten dramatically worse. Since 2020, we've been running trillion-dollar deficits every single year, like it's become our new national pastime. Baseball is out. Fiscal irresponsibility is in. To understand how the world's strongest economy can be bleeding money this badly, we first need to see exactly where the cash is actually going. This is the part where things get a little technical. Stick with me, it'll click by the end, I promise. Government spending breaks down into three buckets: mandatory spending, discretionary spending, and net interest. Let's start with the biggest one, mandatory spending. This is spending locked in by law. Things like Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. It's the financial equivalent of your rent. You handle it, or you face serious consequences. Next, discretionary spending. This is what Congress chooses to fund year by year. Things like national defense, education, and foreign aid. This is the part of the budget politicians love to scream about on cable news. And finally, net interest. The interest we owe on existing debt minus whatever interest income the government receives. It's not optional. It's not voted on. It's simply the bill for all the previous bills we didn't pay. Add these three buckets together, and you get the full federal budget. And here's the real gut punch. Just 5 line items make up nearly 70% of the entire federal budget: Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, national defense, and interest. Everything else combined is essentially pocket change next to these 5. So when someone on your feed is screaming about cutting foreign aid to fix the deficit, the truth is, it wouldn't solve anything. Let me show you the actual math. In 2024, the US spent $78 billion on foreign aid. Sounds massive, right? It's not. That's roughly 1% of the federal budget. So let's say we cut foreign aid to zero, completely. What would that actually buy us? 19 days of Social Security payments. 19 days, and then we're right back to borrowing. Line items like foreign aid aren't the issue. They're barely a rounding error. If we want to actually fix the deficit, there are only 2 real options. Option 1, cut national defense spending. Option 2, cut mandatory spending, Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid. That's it. Those are the only 2 levers that actually move the needle. Everything else is noise too small to matter. Because when nearly 70% of your budget is eaten by 5 giant line items, trimming around the edges to fix the deficit is like trying to lose weight by switching from regular Coke to Diet Coke. It doesn't matter. You're still at McDonald's. Chapter 2, Option 1, Defense. National defense spending runs around $850 billion annually, about 13% of the federal budget. Here's the problem with cutting it. The moment you suggest defense cuts, people start imagining paratroopers landing on their lawn. It's one of the most politically untouchable topics in Washington, which means real cuts here are extremely unlikely. And it's not like we're not overspending. We absolutely are. The United States spends more on defense than the next 10 countries combined, including China, Russia, Germany, and at this point, probably the Avengers. We spend this much because national defense functions as an emotional security blanket wrapped around the entire country. And in a world where global tensions keep rising and the internet keeps insisting World War III is right around the corner, no elected official wants to be the one who cut the military budget. So defense cuts aren't likely to happen. Which leaves us with Option 2. Chapter 3. Option 2. The Untouchable Giants. Cut mandatory spending. Mandatory spending is the Mount Everest of budget challenges. It's massive, it's dangerous, and touching it will end a political career faster than almost anything else in Washington. There are 3 programs considered the truly untouchable giants: Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Combined, these 3 make up $3 trillion annually, 44% of the entire yearly federal budget. So clearly, one of these has to be part of the answer. Let's start with Social Security. It's the single largest federal program in the country, with more than 70 million people relying on it. For about half of all retirees, Social Security provides more than 50% of their total income. For roughly a quarter of retirees, it provides more than 90% of their income. So if you cut Social Security benefits, millions of seniors don't just get mildly inconvenienced, they fall into poverty overnight. And here's another gut punch. The Social Security Trust Fund is projected to become insolvent by 2034. When that happens, the Social Security Administration can only pay benefits out of ongoing tax revenue, which means an automatic 20% benefit cut, whether Congress acts or not. So even doing absolutely nothing still results in cuts, which is somehow even more terrifying. But here's the good news. Social Security is actually fixable. 2 real changes could move the needle significantly. First, lift or eliminate the cap on payroll tax. Right now, individuals only pay Social Security tax on the first $170,000 of income. Everything earned above that is completely untaxed for Social Security purposes. Once again, policy quietly built to favor higher earners. If we eliminated that cap entirely, it would close roughly 73% of Social Security's long-term funding shortfall. The share of untaxed earnings has risen from 10% to nearly 17.5%, meaning we're leaving a substantial and growing pile of revenue on the table every year. Second option, adjust benefits for high-income retirees. This one's simple. Why exactly are we sending Social Security checks to someone earning millions of dollars a year in dividends if a billionaire qualifies for the same Social Security benefit as someone who worked minimum wage their entire life? Something in the eligibility rules is fundamentally broken. So, good news, Social Security is fixable. Bad news, fixing it requires a politician with the courage to actually do it. Chapter 4, Medicare. Medicare provides health coverage for more than 65 million Americans, mostly seniors. It makes up about 13% of the federal budget, over $850 billion annually. That's more than the entire GDP of countries like Argentina, Belgium, Sweden, and Ireland combined into a single U.S. government program. So where's the problem? The Medicare Hospital Insurance Trust Fund is now estimated to become insolvent by 2033. This fund covers inpatient care, nursing facility care, and hospice care. When insolvency hits, the law requires that spending cannot exceed incoming tax revenue once reserves run out, which translates to automatic benefit cuts of around 11%. So what are the actual fixes? Option 1. Raise the Medicare payroll tax. The current combined rate is 2.9%, split between employer and employee. Raising that rate by just 1 percentage point would generate more than $1 trillion over the next decade. What if we only taxed the highest earners? Raising the rate by 1 point for just the top 4 tax brackets would still raise $300 billion. Taxes aren't fun. Nobody enjoys this conversation. But automatic insolvency cuts aren't fun either. There's also the issue of overpayments. Medicare Advantage, the private version of Medicare, lets people get coverage through a private insurer instead of directly from the government, and it has serious problems. The Center for American Progress estimates Medicare Advantage plans are overpaid by 22 to 39% on average, somewhere between $83 and $127 billion annually. Without reform, that overpayment could cost Medicare between $1 and $2 trillion over the next decade. Fixing this would save trillions. It would also infuriate the entire health insurance industry, which is exactly why it will probably never get fixed. Chapter 5. Medicaid. Medicaid covers around 70 million Americans, mostly children, low-income families, disabled adults, and seniors. It's the program that covers grandma's $7,200 a month nursing home bill. It costs the government more than $600 billion annually, over 9% of the federal budget. Unlike Social Security and Medicare, Medicaid can't technically go insolvent. There's no trust fund to run dry. Instead, it's financed through a federal-state partnership. The federal government reimburses a share of each state's spending, and the state covers the rest, but we're still spending far more than we should. And no, the fix isn't throwing vulnerable people into some kind of brutal elimination contest to lower costs. It's actually much simpler than that. Crack down on Medicaid fraud and improper payments. These are payments that should never have been made, caused by data errors, overpayments, and eligibility mistakes. In total, more than 5% of all Medicaid spending goes toward these errors, costing the government tens of billions of dollars every single year. Chapter 6. What happens if we do nothing? I've covered fixes that could save the government trillions, but what happens if America just decides to deal with this later? This is, more or less, exactly where we currently are. And it leads down a genuinely dark road. Since we run an annual deficit, the federal government has to keep borrowing whatever gap exists between revenue and spending. And investors aren't naive. They can see this isn't sustainable. If they see a country borrowing trillions every year with no credible plan to address its spiraling debt, they demand a higher return to compensate for the added risk, which means the interest rate at which the United States borrows rises, and higher interest rates make everything more expensive. Your mortgage, your car loan, your business loan, your credit card rate, everything gets more expensive all at once. Higher interest rates essentially choke the entire economy in slow motion, but it's not too late. The United States still has a window to fix this, but that window is shrinking every year we wait. The longer we delay, the fewer real options remain on the table. We need to act now. Before this video ends, I want to hear from you directly. Because after spending 60 hours buried in this research, here's what I actually learned. There is no perfect solution. There are only trade-offs and sacrifices. So drop your own ideas for fixing this in the comments. I'll genuinely be responding to as many as I can. Because if there's one single takeaway from this entire video, it's this: doing nothing is not actually an option. It just feels like one, right up until it isn't.